So let's continue this idea. So we are in tipping points, but we are also now coming back a little bit to resilience, because how stable you are in the current stable state obviously depends on how resilient you are to the perturbation, because any system with a large enough perturbation may tip over. For example, the meteorite crash wiped out the dinosaurs, even though there is debate about whether it was the crash itself or the diseases that followed and so on and so forth. But let's say at least that was a big enough perturbation that there was a big tip over, and then mammals dominated after that and so on and so forth. So we are not talking about such large perturbations right now, even though we are constantly pushing the system now with increasing greenhouse gases and population, which has increased and it's still increasing, but is expected to hit peak population, has hit peak population in many countries already, and so on, right? So in that context, along with the increasing use of the term resilience in sustainability debates, we also have see the use of the term robustness. What is robustness and how does it differ from resilience? The concept of robustness comes from engineering and is used to design systems. For example, engineers develop control systems for airplanes such that the ability of the airplane to fly is robust to mechanical failures, turbulence, wind shear, etc. So here you're not talking about small perturbation and coming back to the functional state. You're just talking about perturbations which do not cause damage to the plane that's flying, or a system, a building, or whatever else, a car, and so on. So the robustness in that sense is a resistance or ability to withstand perturbation against failures, and so on, right? In their design of a robust airplane, engineers include various backup systems to avoid the situation in which the system, i.e. the plane and the people in it, flips from cruising at a constant altitude of, let's say, 30,000 feet or 10 kilometers, about 10 kilometers, into a free fall or a dangerous climb down with unsafe landing, and so on. So there are safety factors built in. Also, there are redundancies built in. So if you have autopilot, then it is instrumented that pilot can take over and land with manual piloting as well, and so on. Okay, if one engine fails, the other engine is designed to make sure that you do land safely, etc. But if you have a turbulence that hits you and causes a deep drop and you are near the ground, as it happened in the 1980s with the Delta flight in Dallas, then no system will help you. You will just crash and explode, right? So we are talking about reducible risks and resilience and robustness. But engineers also know that there are costs related to robustness, and trade-offs need to be made. So if you make the plane very heavy, it will cost you much more fuel. Engine will need to be stronger. So you are choosing an optimal level of robustness and safety and of course cost benefit analysis of carrying the passengers across a pond or a land. Do we build a wall 10 meters high around New Orleans to avoid damages from the next major hurricane? As we design systems to reduce our sensitivity to damages, i.e. to be robust from disturbances, we have to make choices about what disturbances to consider. To be robust to one type of disturbance may create vulnerabilities to other types of disturbances. For example, utilizing concrete canals instead of earthen canals for irrigation may reduce the number of washouts. So mud canals, earthen canals tend to get washed out if there is a heavy runoff or heavy rain event. Concrete canals don't always collapse that easily, but concrete canals may also reduce the ability of farmers to be adaptable and spatially reconfigure water flows using temporary mud walls in earthen canal systems to deliver water to the farmers' fields under variable circumstances. So you can easily modify, add a new channel or close an older channel and so on with mud or earthen canal systems, which is not possible with concrete canal systems. They cannot be very flexible in that sense. You design it and put it down, you will have to break the concrete canal to add something or subtract something, and so on. So there are other issues about earthen canals allowing more soaking. It can be loss or it can be recharge and so on and so forth. Engineers argue that systems can be robust and yet fragile. They can become more robust to big fires but more vulnerable to small fires. Hence, difficult choices have to be made. Okay, we won't go into the details here, but if you focus on avoiding large-scale wildfires, you may end up allowing too many small fires while you focus on the larger fires and how the system is modified to deal with only large fires, right? So in that sense, I will want to come back and talk about stability. So we are always assuming that we know how stable the system is in the given state and how long it will stay there. In a real Earth system, when you are dealing with time scales going from, let's say, multiple centuries for anthropogenic warming and recovery, let's say mitigation, adaptation versus natural perturbations, ice ages and so on and so forth, how do you know how long that stable system is going to stay? So you are assuming that whatever is, we are very different than at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we are now calling it climate crisis. We are talking about tipping points and end of the world kind of scenarios and so on. Of course, there have been impacts. People are getting hurt. People are being displaced. But it depends on how you see, right? So if you think about mortalities due to natural hazards, that is, they are less than 1% of the total deaths per year, whereas cardiovascular diseases typically are about 30% of the total deaths. So what is that you are trying to do when you discuss climate change and protecting against climate change, global warming targets, and so on? So this is a good example of how unstable or stable systems are. This is a double pendulum, which can look smooth for some time and then can suddenly go into a freaky looking unstable state. So here you'll see that it's going crazy compared to some smoother states, and it goes in and out quickly. But if you stretch it out to Earth system timescales, as I said, during the time of the dinosaurs, we were much warmer than present, and there was no glaciers anywhere, and sea level rise was higher, continental configurations were slightly different, and so on. And of course, why are we worried then? Because we were not around. We evolved as modern humans mostly in the Holocene, where temperatures remained fairly stable, in the sense they only vacillated by about half a degree or so around the mean state. But even those half-degree changes had major impacts on civilizations and so on. But our vulnerabilities also changed because of this moving to agricultural lifestyle, settling down, growing in population, and so on, as opposed to hunter-gatherers who just moved in response to climate change and food availability and so on. So now we are heading into the future in this way. So the beyond industrial revolution, we were okay for a while, and then as fossil fuel burning continued to rise, lifestyles got better, of course, science and technology, convenience, and now we are worried about where we are headed into 2100 to 2200 and beyond. So in the context of the past climate variabilities, you can see that there are periods where you may think we are in a semi-stable state, and then, for example, there were abrupt changes after the Pleistocene glaciations started around 2 million years ago or so. You had 100,000 years of glaciation building slowly, and then you had abrupt change and then building again, and so on and so forth. So how do you measure stability in this context? So that's why we look at a more focused way on the last ice age, which got colder and colder, and then we came out of it around 12,000 years ago and became modern agricultural human beings and developed industrial revolution, and now we are perturbing the climate seriously. So this entire idea of tipping points, stable regimes, and shifting stable states and so on has to be kept in mind in the context of these kind of time scales that are there, because every time there is natural variability as well. Let's say before the industrial revolution it was mostly natural variability that was causing the greening of Saharas, people moving away from the Nile, colonizing more of the Sahara and then shrinking back, disappearances of civilizations, Mesopotamians, Babylonians, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Mayas, Incas, and so on and so forth. So there are always smaller tipping points or civilizations being perturbed seriously, but our own vulnerability has changed over time as well. So I'm mixing resilience, robustness, and vulnerability and so on, but we will come back to some of those when we go to real systems and how we think about managing the systems, which is the next podcast. It's called Managing Performance of Systems. So systems essentially are related to internal feedbacks and components that connect to perform something that each component cannot perform by itself. You can think of the Earth system, or you can think of your own body, skeletal, nervous system, blood circulation system, digestive system, and so on. You know, there is an old joke that what is the difference between a dead cat and a live cat? A cat is alive as long as it's breathing. It may be blind, paralyzed, deaf, whatever, but it's alive if it's breathing. But if all the systems are working, if it can hear, see, and run around, then it's doing many more things. So the system is working at different levels even though it's alive, right? So these are the kind of things we have to worry about. So we'll come back and put these things into the context of first managing the performance of systems, and then about case studies of real world systems in the context of sustaining the commons. Okay?